Man. Okay, it's 7 p.m. and I will call to order this regular meeting of the Mount Pleasant City Commission this Monday, April 12th, 2021. And we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Tonight, I'm excited to announce that our new clerk is with us, Heather Bauck. And Heather is coming to us from Delta Township. She is an experienced clerk and has worked in many elections. She has a degree from Michigan State University in Human Resources. And she's a certified elections official and also a Michigan Advanced Assessing Officer, and working on her certified clerk designation for municipalities. And so, Heather, I'd just like to thank you for being with us tonight and joining the Mount Pleasant organization.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And so, since it's your first meeting, I want you to know that with anyone who's been in your role that I've been involved working with, that if you need to stop me and interrupt me, please go ahead and do that at any time during the meeting. So, okay, and then I'll let you do the roll call for tonight.
All righty. Commissioner Alsager?
In the city of Mount Pleasant, the county of Isabella, the state of Michigan.
Commissioner Gillis?
Mount Pleasant, Isabella, Michigan.
Commissioner Ronan?
City of Mount Pleasant, County of Isabella, and the great state of Michigan.
Commissioner Toles?
City of Mount Pleasant, Isabella County, State of Michigan.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher?
City of Mount Pleasant, County of Isabella, State of Michigan.
And Mayor Joseph?
City of Mount Pleasant, County of Isabella, and the state of Michigan.
And then I have absent Commissioner Simon.
Yep, unfortunately, Commissioner Simon is not feeling well tonight, so she will not be with us. Next, we have our proclamations and presentations. But first, I'd like to hand it over to Manager Ridley. She has a few words to say about Kathy Tillman.
Thank you, Mayor. Kathy Tillman worked or volunteered on our airport advisory board for a number of years from 2013 until the current time period. And we received information last week that Ms. Tillman passed away. And so I wanted to take a couple minutes to recognize the valuable service that she brought to our airport advisory board and her volunteer efforts at the airport. And also on behalf of the city to express our condolences to her friends and her family during this difficult time. She will certainly be missed by the city, but I'm sure she will be missed even more so by her friends and family.
You will. Thank you, Manager Ridley. Next, we have an introduction of recent city employees hired, and we have a video.
Shar Rapoon has been the Human Resources Consultant for just over 8 years and has taken on numerous items such as the administration of all benefit plans, safety officer responsibilities, and creation of the Safety Alliance, workers' compensation.
We really like that video. It keeps coming up. Let's see if Nick has the more current one by chance.
I do. One moment.
I think Char's been introduced to you 4 times now, so you should know her really well.
Very happy to have her with us.
I'm actually getting a playback error, so I mean, you can come back to me in a minute. I'll re-download it, or
It's up to you, Mayor. We can do that, or we can move it to the next meeting, whatever your preference is.
Look, we can give it a minute. That's fine.
If you want, Mayor, you could do the next 2 items on the agenda, and then he would probably have it done if we wanted to try again.
That's a good idea. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda tonight? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so we'll go into public input on agenda items. If you're with us by phone, you can hit *9 on your telephone and it'll do the raise hand feature and I can recognize you for public comment. If you're with us by Zoom, if you go to the bottom of your screen, if you hit participants, there should be a raise hand button. And you can hit that and I'll recognize you for public comment. And I just ask that if recognized, you state your name and your address for the record. Manager Ridley, did we have any emailed comments?
No, sir, I have not received any yet.
Just a reminder, we do have 2 public hearings tonight. And so if you are with us to speak at those public hearings, you will have a chance at that time at items number 10 and 11 tonight. So I'm not seeing any hands up in the attendees section. And so we'll close public comment on agenda items at this time. And then are we ready for the video for city employees?
Christina Parrish joined our team as a utility billing office professional on March 8th. Christina comes to us from Mid-Michigan Industries, where she provided life and employability skills, as well as employment opportunities to individuals with mental and/or physical disabilities. Prior to that, she worked as an educational assistant for Shepherd Public Schools. Her employment history also includes administrative assistant experience with the state of Michigan and bank teller experience. Christina has a Bachelor of Science degree in Early Childhood Development and Learning, as well as a Bachelor of Science degree in Psychology, both from Central Michigan University. Welcome, Christina. Reese Hart joined our public safety team as a paid on-call firefighter on March 17th. Reese graduated from Mount Pleasant High School in 2013 and attended Central Michigan University. In 2018, he pursued a career in the pipeline industry. Reese lives in Mount Pleasant and is a great addition to the fire department. We wish Reese much success in completing a medical first responder class and his firefighter 1 and 2 training early next year. Welcome, Reese. Heather Bauck joined us as city clerk on March 22nd. Heather comes to us from Delta Township in the Lansing area. She worked for Delta Township with 2 different elected township clerks beginning in 2005. Since 2013, she has worked primarily in the assessing department, but remained involved in the clerk's office, particularly with elections. Heather has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Human Resources from Michigan State University. She holds certifications as an election official and Michigan Advanced Assessing Officer. She is in the process of obtaining her Certified Municipal Clerk designation. Welcome, Heather.
Okay. Well, I would just like to thank Christina Reese and again, Heather for joining our organization and being with us, and good luck to all of our new employees. Thank you for your service. At this time, we'll go to the receipt of petitions and communications for our agenda. And so, Manager Ridley, take it away.
Yes, in this section tonight, you have the monthly report or the ongoing report on pending items, and then the monthly report on citizen complaints received. You have the January minutes of the Tax Increment Finance Authority, February minutes of the Parks and Recreation Commission, January minutes of the Traffic Control Committee, and unfortunately, a resignation from Jim Horton from the Tax Increment Finance Authority Board due to him no longer owning property in the district that he was representing. And then you have correspondence that was received from Alan and Mary Montoy on behalf of one of the pickleball courts or one of the pickleball groups, thanking you for the allocation of funding toward the pickleball courts this summer. And then the next item is something that we should all be very proud of. The City of Mount Pleasant again received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And this comes from a very thorough review by the Government Finance Officers Association of our annual report that we must file. And this is a result of the work primarily of Marianne Cornexel and her staff. But what's significant about it is this is the 33rd consecutive year that the City of Mount Pleasant has received this award. So congrats to Marianne and her staff on that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Marianne and your staff. 33 years is quite a legacy to have, and without your excellent professional just expertise and work, we wouldn't have that. And it makes our jobs easier as elected officials to know that our staff is of the highest caliber. Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, I would also like to bring about a congratulations to the police department who made it another month with no citizens complaints and is serving our community with forethought and an excellent reputation, continuously serving our community. So I want to thank our director and our officers for protecting and continuing to serve our community. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Alsager?
Thank you. I don't know if this is, with me being somewhat still a rookie, starting my second year, but when I read the reports from the various commissions that we have, it seems like some do the attendance the way we do and some don't. And then the other thing I notice is there's still some abbreviations that to me, you can mostly figure them out, but not always. So just the idea that we could maybe make them a little more readable. Thank you.
Commissioner Alsager, I would say, and obviously I don't know exactly what abbreviations you're referencing, but I would encourage you to follow up with Manager Ridley and
Learn those.
Right, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar have an asterisk next to them. Are there any items that need to be removed? Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, could I have number 15 removed, please?
Okay. Item number 15 is the resolution in support of final approval for the temporary traffic control order number 2, 2020. Any other items that need to be removed from the consent calendar tonight? Okay, seeing none, Manager Ridley, if you'd like to
Oh,
give us some.
yeah. This is going to be a speech because there's a lot of them left on the consent calendar, so I'll do my best. First, we have the approval of your minutes of your regular meeting of March 22nd. Then we have 4 bids that are on the consent calendar this evening. The first one is for the replacement of one of our parks mowers, which was planned in the operating budget. And we're recommending the purchase from Spartan Distributors through the National Omnia Partners Public Sector Program, which is like the My Deal program. And the price is $66,382, less a $15,000 trade-in allowance. The second bid was in the approved operating budget for part of it, and that was for improvements to the City Hall HVAC system, heat, ventilation, and air conditioning. Try not to do acronyms, Commissioner Alsager. To improve the operation, especially during the cooling system. And while we were working on the specs for that, it was identified that the software systems controlling both the system in City Hall and at our public safety building needed to be replaced to provide better management of the systems and better energy efficiency in the long run. So we're recommending a sole source contract with ATI for this contract for $69,100 for that work, all of which has been budgeted except for $14,500, which is the piece for the public safety building. And we have adequate funds in the assigned fund balance for energy conservation that could be allocated toward that. The third bid is for the replacement of one of our plow trucks, which was in the operating budget. And we're recommending award to Tri-County International through the My Deal contract for the purchase of the cabin chassis for $78,660. As mentioned in the memo, later this year, we'll bring you a separate bid for the purchase of the remaining parts that are added to the truck that include things like the dump body, the V-box insert, the salt spreader, and the underbody scraper. And then the last bid on the consent calendar is for the replacement of the fishing decks at Mill Pond Park. This was a project that was planned for last year but did not get completed, so you reallocated the funds earlier this year. And based on the bids received, we're recommending award of the bid to Denali Construction for $44,300, which is under the budgeted amount for those replacements. The next item is we're recommending that you amend the fees that we charge for the installation of new water meters. Last year, the City Commission approved the fees for those, but since that time, we've changed the type of meters that we use at larger installations that are 1.5 inches or larger. And these new meters use more of an ultrasonic device and don't require what was on there that was called a strainer. And so they're therefore less expensive. So we're recommending the City Commission approve the revised lower fees for those kits as they are installed. Next, tonight's the night that under the city charter, you received the proposed capital improvement plan, and the link was emailed to you right before the meeting. And it's also been placed on the website. And if you want a printed copy of that, be sure to let us know and we'll have that delivered to you. But at our next meeting, we'll be having a presentation of the overview of the capital improvement plan, and then we will commit the next 2 work sessions to your discussion on that plan. So tonight, we're just recommending you receive it and set the public hearing for May 24th to obtain public comment on it. Next, we're recommending that you extend an agreement with Northern Initiatives for the marketing and administration of our outstanding revolving loan funds. Northern Initiatives has been the consultant for that project since 2017, and the current agreement expires this summer. And the MEDC has recommended an extension of that agreement through June 30th of 2024. The next item is a recommendation for a resolution for an extension of a timeline for Absolute Royale at 801 Industrial Avenue for an extension to file their phase 2 application to the state for a Class C adult use grower license. You'll recall you had a similar request to this at your last meeting because the applicant wanted some time to do renovations at the site before applying to the state for the phase 2 license. And that is also true in this case as well. The applicant would like some time to do some renovations before filing that application. And so they've requested an extension of 9 months, which would take them to in December for the ability to do that. Like last time, the total time period is not changing. It's still expected that the full license would be received within the 18-month time period at this point in time. And the ordinance gives the City Commission the authority to consider these extension requests upon a showing of good cause. So the resolution has been drafted. It's similar to what you approved for the other applicant at your last meeting. The next item is for a license agreement with CMU. And if you've been around campus at all the last few years, you've seen the various wayfinding signs that CMU is installing in and around their campus. And in the past, when we've granted authority to install those signs in the city right-of-way, we've also recommended to you a license agreement that makes it clear that CMU is responsible for the maintenance of those signs and is also responsible to provide assistance if we ever need to do work in the right-of-way around those signs. And CMU is in the process of installing additional signs, and one of them falls in our right-of-way again, and that's at the intersection of Main and Bellows. And so we're recommending a license agreement for that location. My memo incorrectly referred to 2 signs, but there's only one that is in the city right-of-way that license agreement would cover. The next item is when the City Commission confirmed the sale of property in Industrial Park North earlier this year, we indicated that it would be necessary to make some adjustments to some existing easements for the maintenance of the detention pond in that area. The survey work for that property purchase has now been completed, and the purchaser and the city engineer have agreed to what adjustments are necessary for that easement. And this would allow the city to continue to have proper access to both the pipes to the detention pond and the maintenance of the pond. I should point out that over the weekend, we did receive a revised legal description, which is the exhibit to the agreement that's before you tonight. There's no changes to the easement agreement itself, just to the exhibit. So we're recommending that you authorize the mayor to sign the release of the easement as presented in your packet, and we'll attach the appropriate exhibits to it. The next item is we've received the grant documents from the Michigan Department of Transportation, which would allow the city to be reimbursed for the funds that we have expended related to the acquisition of the navigation easements near the airport. So this grant would cover both the easements that were purchased as well as the investigation and survey work that was done by Mead and Hunt in preparation for those purchases. So we recommend you approve the standard Michigan Department of Transportation resolution to accept that grant. And it should be noted that our city cost is only 5% of the cost indicated in that memo. The other 95% is reimbursed from federal and state funds. And the second to last item on the consent calendar is a budget amendment for the water resource recovery facility. And you'll recall that earlier this year, we brought you amendments for
that transitioned really well from.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing some feedback. Are you hearing some feedback as well? Nick? Let me see if I can mute Nick. There, that's better. Sorry about that. So earlier this year, we brought you budget amendments for various projects that were not completed in last calendar year. And at that time, we mentioned that there would be an additional request coming forward from the Water Resource Recovery Facility as we sorted out which work was completed before December 31st and which would still be completed this year. And we've now sorted that out with the various contractors that were doing the work at that facility. And we're recommending the allocation of funds in this year's budget to cover the cost of the projects that will be completed this year, which amount to $947,590, all funded from the reserve accounts in the water recovery resource facility accounts. And then lastly, we're recommending approval of payrolls and warrants.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. That was quite the consent calendar tonight. Commissioner Gillis.
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
And Commissioner Elsager. Mary, we didn't hear you. Sorry.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented, excluding obviously item number 15. And a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Toles?
No, I was just going to make a motion to second that.
Okay. With no other hands up, I think we can go into a roll call vote to approve the consent calendar.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Toles,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0.
Okay. Consent calendar is approved as voted on. Next on our agenda is item number 10, which is our first public hearing of the evening. And this is a recommended rezoning request from CD3 to CD4 for 1024 and 1026 South University, and to consider approval of the same. Manager Ridley, would you like to give us a brief overview before I open the public hearing?
Yeah, the only additional things I would add in addition to what you said, Mayor, is that the current owner of those properties intends to demolish the 2 existing buildings that are on each site and construct 1 triplex on each of those lots. And those triplexes or any construction that would take place on those lots would have to conform with our character-based code to make sure that they the design would fit in with the surrounding and neighboring properties. And this rezoning request was unanimously recommended to you by the Planning Commission. So after holding the public hearing this evening, we recommend you approve the rezoning as presented. And City Planner Jacob Kane is with us this evening if you have any questions on it after the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. At this time, I'll open up the public hearing. If you're with us by phone, you can hit *9. And if you're with us by Zoom, you can go to the bottom of your screen and hit the raise hand feature. And I just ask that you state your name and your address for the record. Nancy, did we have any emailed comments on this public hearing?
No, there's been no comments on this public hearing, Mayor.
Okay. All right, I don't see any hands up, and so I will close the public hearing at this time and open up the floor for motion and discussion from the commission. Commissioner Elsager.
I move to approve the rezoning request from CD3 to CD4 for both 1024 and 1026 South University, and ordinance on the same.
And Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the rezoning request for 1024 and 1026 South University. And we'll open up for discussion. Commissioner Toles.
I will be moving forward to approve this tonight. I looked at it. We're demolishing 2 older buildings and putting 2 new buildings up, and it was already approved by the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Elsager.
I just had one question. Maybe Jacob can answer this about the parking that they'll need, it seems like that might be slightly increased from what they have now. I'm sure it's been considered.
Good evening. I apologize. Commissioner Alsager, as with last time I joined the meeting, I caught the very beginning of your question and then missed it as I was brought into the meeting. So if you
I
wouldn't
need
mind.
to change my timing. I apologize.
No, it was just to ask you about the parking considerations, since there's going to be a few more residents total per lot.
That's a great question. There's actually, under the proposed condition by the applicant, there would be significantly fewer people living on site. These properties are currently licensed for a combined total of 19 occupants. And under the proposed conditions with multiple family, there'd be a total of 12.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Gillis?
So Jacob, the question is the parking going to be provided on site, or is this going to be one of the developments where the parking is on the street and tenants are parking on our public streets?
I've already been, Commissioner Gillis, I've already been working with the applicant on draft site plans, conceptual plans for the property, and both include a parking spot for each occupant of each unit.
They include a parking spot for each occupant?
Yes.
Oh, yay. Thank you, Jacob.
Okay, without any other questions or comments, I think we can go to a roll call vote on the motion to approve the rezoning of 1024 and 1026 South University from CD3 to CD4.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, thank you. Motion is approved. Next is our second public hearing of the evening, which is a recommended text change to table 154.410A to permit music, art, and dance studios in the SDI district and consider approval of the ordinance on the same. Manager Ridley, would you like to give a brief overview?
Yes, this recommendation from the Planning Commission would allow for the special district of industrial land to have, to allow for dance, art, and music studios, as you mentioned. Health and fitness studios are already currently allowed in industrial areas, and this would expand it to those additional uses, which often have similar building design characteristics. So again, after holding the public hearing, we recommend you approve the text change as is recommended by the Planning Commission. And Jacob Kane is still with you if you have any questions, and I won't move him, so he'll hear the whole question.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us as well, Jacob. At this time, I will open up the public hearing, and if you're with us by phone, you can hit *9. And if you're with us by Zoom, you can go to the bottom of your screen and hit the raise hand button. And I ask that you state your name and your address for the record. Manager Ridley, did we have any emailed comments on this public hearing?
No, sir, none have been received.
Okay. I don't see any hands up at this time, so we'll close the public hearing and I'll open it up for motion and discussion from the commission. Commissioner Alsager.
I move to approve the ordinance to amend table 154.410.A to permit music, art, and dance studios in the SD1 district as presented.
And Commissioner Gillis.
Second.
Here we have a motion and a second to approve the recommended text change to 154.410A in the SDI district. Any discussion? Commissioner Toles.
Jacob, did we once at one time have a dance studio in the industrial park off Fancher there, where McDonald cabinet factory is right now? Or was that before the text change?
It's possible. If it was there, it would have been before my time here under the old ordinance, but
it was a while ago, so there must have been a text change then after that.
If you may remember, Commissioner Toles, the 1984 ordinance allowed the Planning Commission to allow any other use in the district that they felt fit. So it's possible that that's the clause under which a previous dance studio was permitted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gillis.
Yes, Commissioner Toles, I think it was a gymnastic type business there, maybe 20 years ago.
Yep, that's what it was.
Us old townies remember that kind of stuff. Not all the time, though.
Commissioner Ronan.
Yeah, I don't know if it's fair to ask this or not, Jacob, but can we anticipate some additional dance studios being developed in town? I mean, is this a hot item or something?
Commissioner Ronan, this item was, this request was brought to us by a property owner in an industrial district who was working with a possible tenant for a new building in the one of our industrial parks. So that's what precipitated this text change.
Terrific.
I'll just say briefly, I really like this change because I do think that you see these other types of uses in other communities in the industrial parks or districts. And so I just think it kind of makes us a little more flexible and in line with what people expect in other communities as well. So I do see Commissioner Toles and Commissioner Gillis's hands up, and I'm not sure if.
I'm sorry, I didn't lower mine.
That's okay. Commissioner Gillis, okay, go ahead.
Jacob, could you tell me which industrial park that is, or if it's just the one north of Pickard?
It was Industrial Park South, Commissioner Gillis.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay. With no other hands up, I think we can go to a roll call vote on the motion to approve the text change in 154.410A to allow art, dance, and music studios in the SDI district.
All right, Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Toles,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay. Motion is carried. Thank you. Next on our agenda is item 12A, which is the parking lot 6 and 8 reconstruction. I know there are a couple options in the agenda packet, and so I'll let Manager Ridley give us a brief overview.
Yes, these two parking lots are planned for reconstruction this year in the operating budget, and parking lot 6 is at the northwest corner of Illinois and University, and parking lot 8 is at the southwest corner of Broadway and Lansing. And as indicated in the packet, bids were sent out with a base bid, and the base bid includes the standard parking lot construction that would typically be done on a parking lot that needs to be reconstructed. But then we also provided alternates for the parking lots that included additional amenities that could be constructed at the same time. And those amenities are offered in some of our other city-owned downtown parking lots. But you'll note from the chart that we included in the packet that not all parking lots have the same amenities. It's kind of evolved over time as far as which ones have the masonry fences, which ones have the wrought iron fences, which ones have benches and so forth. And so there is some inconsistency down there, but we bid the typical amenities that are typically desired to improve the appearance and the look of the downtown. And in this case, the Downtown Tax Increment Finance Authority Fund for the most part, has adequate funds to cover the base bid reconstruction of the 2 lots. You'll notice that it's a little short depending on which bidder we go with, but the vast majority of the funding is provided by the Downtown Tax Increment Finance Authority. The amenities, though, would be covered with funding from the Capital Improvement Fund if you decide to go that route. And I should point out that all future city-owned downtown parking lots, even the reconstruction pieces of those, will be funded by the Capital Improvement Fund in the future. And that's based on a decision a couple of years ago that concluded that the parking lots in the downtown area benefit actually the whole community. And the desire was to have the city commission have the ability to prioritize and decide on all such city infrastructure and be able to look at the bigger picture. So we reduced the capture of the finance authority with a commitment to use up the existing funds for parking lots. And then when those were done, the Capital Improvement Fund would pick up the future parking lots. So as the mayor indicated, the city engineer, Stacy Tuari, gave you 3 options of what you can do based on the bids that were received. And we believe that the amenities do provide a more attractive and appealing look to the downtown. And so we therefore wrote up the recommendation to award the bid to Green Tech Systems for $579,000 and $579,772, which would necessitate an amendment from the Capital Improvement Fund of $165,790 because all of the amenities that were bid would be funded. As I mentioned earlier, we recognize though that that is not the case in all of the downtown parking lots. And we also recognize the need to be cognizant of future potential funding challenges that the city may be facing. And so that's why we offered the 2 other options for your consideration of either just doing the base bid or only doing the amenities that are more cost effective to do at the time the parking lot is reconstructed. So we've drafted the recommended motion, assuming you would do all amenities. But if the commission is not comfortable with that, the memo from city engineer Stacy Tuari provides some information on the other 2 options available to you.
Okay, thank you, Manager Ridley. Commissioner Tullis?
I'll make a motion to move to authorize a contract with Green Tech Systems LLC for $579,772 for the reconstruction, excuse me, of parking lots 6 and 8, and authorize a budget amendment of $165,790 from the Capital Improvement Fund.
And just to be clear, that was option A, correct, Commissioner Tullis?
Correct.
Okay. And Commissioner Alsager?
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve option A in the bid. Commissioner Tullis, did you have a comment?
No, I just want to make one quick comment. I think everybody should support this. Both those lots are in bad shape. And any of the extra amendments like benches and everything else that we've already had in there, or fences, should be put back in. You know, I think that's only proper.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up for discussion, so we can go to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Tullis,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, next on our agenda is item number 14, which is to consider the contract amendment with environmental firm for additional landfill evaluation services. And I will hand this over to Manager Ridley for overview and
Okay, as the City Commission is aware, we've been working cooperatively with the State Department, Eagle, regarding the closed city-owned landfill, which has been designated as a Part 201 site by the state. And throughout this process, we've used 2 different environmental consulting firms to provide the investigative work needed to better delineate the issues so that the appropriate remedial action plans could be put in place. And the most recent contract was with Manic Smith Group, and that was based on a competitive quality-based selection process that the City Commission requested that we went through, and they did the last round of investigative work for us. So based on the findings from that work and the types of contamination that were found, they have recommended what the next stage of investigative work would be, met with Eagle, and Eagle made a couple suggested changes to it. And so we have before you a recommended contract tonight with Manic Smith Group for $39,700 for the work. And the funding for this phase would be covered $20,000 from tribal 2% grant that we received last fall, and the remaining $19,700 would be from the general fund. And as a reminder, all of this investigation is to better learn more about the extent of the present contamination in order to hopefully minimize the amount of remedial action that is required. And as we've learned due to the complexity of this matter, we asked Manic Smith Group and Eagle to put together for us a roadmap of what the next steps may look like as additional information is obtained about the site. And that potential roadmap is provided in your packet. But as indicated, that roadmap is very tentative because it's wholly dependent on what is found at each stage of the investigative process and could change what of those next steps may be necessary. And what we've really learned from this process is the results of each phase influence what is done next. And the whole goal is to fully understand the current conditions before any remedial action plans are put in place. So we're recommending to you tonight a contract amendment for the next phase with Manic Smith Group for $39,700 with the appropriate budget amendments.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. I'll open up for discussion and motions. Commissioner Tolis.
I'd like to make a quick couple comments on this.
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm sorry, Commissioner Tolis. I want a motion in a second.
I'll wait. I'll wait.
Commissioner Elsager.
I move to authorize a contract extension with MSG for environmental consulting services of the former landfill of a not to exceed amount of $39,700 and the appropriate budget amendments.
And Commissioner Ronan. We didn't hear you, George. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'll second that. Thank you.
Okay. So we do have a motion and a second to approve the contract with MSG, and then I will recognize Commissioner Tolis for comment.
Thank you. A couple quick comments. I think we're on our third draw on this project now, which I voted no every time. And I'm looking at page 3 of some of the stuff that was talked to by MSG with a DEQ that I would have challenged. And one of them is investigate the extent of the landfill deposition area and the composition of waste fill. So now we're at the point now where we got to drill holes to tell them what kind of fill is in the dump. This is ridiculous. And then right under that, determination of the thickness of the landfill cover and test compositions. I mean, this was already capped and approved once already. Now we're going back and redoing it again. And now we're retesting 9 of the wells along the west and north edge of the property. I mean, this is just open-ended. I mean, There's no challenges to it. Every company that goes to the DEQ doesn't challenge anything. They just put down whatever they request, and we're going to do it. And now I think, I don't know, we got to be close to $80,000 or $90,000 on this, if I'm not mistaken. I think we've had 3 draws, or did 3 different assessments.
Manager, really, do we know? I'm off the top of my head, I don't recall how much money we've spent.
Yeah, the first contract with AKT was for $30,000, a not to exceed amount. I don't have what we actually spent on it to know if we went to the full amount or not. The second contract with Manic Smith Group was for $24,870. And that was fully funded by the tribal 2% funds. And again, I don't have the actual amount spent. And then you're right, this one would be $39,700.
And 20, I think, was it 20,000 of that is covered by a tribal 2%?
Correct.
Commissioner Elsager?
I just had a comment. I found it real interesting in the support paperwork for this, that there's a document from June of 2019 when John Zhang was our Director of Public Works, where we were first notified that we were out of compliance and we needed to do the work. So I'm going to be supporting this, that it is needed work.
Commissioner Gillis?
I would feel much more comfortable if this was a directive from the DEQ or Eagle rather than us looking for problems. From the very first time we decided to go in through that cap, the integrity of the cap was what I was concerned about. There were pipes eliminating into the river, and those have been capped. So there is no more fluids or water going to the river. It seems that we are fishing to try to find something that may be wrong without having any evidence of. The first holes that were dug or drilled showed some contamination, not levels that were extremely high or that would automatically be found within a landfill. And as Commissioner Tolis reminded us, we are going down the rabbit hole. We're getting close to 100,000. I don't consider the tribe's money as well. The tribe's paying that part, so that's not really our money. It's still money that's being spent where I don't think we necessarily have to spend it like that. I think we are doing way too much to accommodate a company that wants to make money. They will be going, when they work with Eagle, of course, they are going to recommend more testing, more boring, more. Now we're looking into the landfill, actually what the fill was that we put in there that was already authorized to use. My concern is that this is going to cost the city taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars looking for something that may never be evident, and that we are not necessarily being directed to do this. There has not been anything else that's been found floating into the river or into our water wells. I did have a question about, I was under the assumption there was no water wells, drinking water wells in the area a mile from the old landfill, but in the write-up, the company that we're paying this money to, this last allotment, or maybe it was the one before, I guess, had identified 18. Are you telling me 18 residential areas are still using well water? Or is that the people in Union Township?
Yeah, that's outside the city limits, outside of the areas that are served by those municipal water supplies.
Okay, so it is Union Township downriver.
Yeah.
The water wells that people are using for drinking water are in Union Township, and they're, I'm assuming, downriver, obviously.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that they're drinking water wells. I don't think they've done that investigation to that extent yet, but there are wells that are in the database that are within the area.
So they don't even know yet if it's drinking water. So it could be a well that they're using to water their garden.
It could be. I mean, it could very well be drinking water wells, but yeah.
Okay. Well, my concern is the rabbit hole, and we're not having directives by Eagle. And when we hire contractors, they are in the business to stay being employed by us. So every time we decide to do another bid or give them a contract, that is money in their pockets. So they may paint the worst case scenario because it keeps them in business. It's job security. So, but my main concern is the integrity of the cap that we continue to bore into, and the fill that was approved to be placed there is has already been approved. So I will also be voting no on this bid. Thank you.
I think I just had a couple questions from the discussion. We've been doing this semi-voluntarily is my understanding, is that we are doing this in coordination with Eagle, and that they are aware of the situation and sort of maybe not giving us hard, like, you've got to do this now, but they would if we said, hey, we're going to ignore this problem, correct?
I'm not sure I would exactly say it semi-voluntarily. They did give us the letter saying we do have a Part 201 landfill that does need to comply with the current regulations. And so what we've been doing voluntarily is working step by step through it with Eagle and the appropriate environmental services firm. But you're right, if they feel like we are not making the progress that they think we should be making in addressing it, they could require us to do certain things in a much shorter time period. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, they could also, if they're not getting cooperation, levy fines against the city. Is that accurate, Jason?
Yeah, I believe that's the case. And as far as the specific direction, I don't know that we would get a ton of more specific direction. The thing is that we're responsible for determining this, and so we have to suggest to them how we do that. Now, they can approve that or not approve it, but I don't know that we're going to get a lot of specific direction as to exactly what steps we need to take. These were the steps that were agreed to. And so I think this is the best path forward.
I appreciate that, Director Moore and Manager Ridley. I guess for this issue, it boils down to me is that either way that we approach it, eventually this is an issue that's going to have to be taken care of. And this seems like the more cost-effective way before we incur fines and more coercive direct action from Eagle. I also think that I think we have sort of a responsibility to be a good steward of the natural resources that are there. And if we did find contaminants of concern when they did the initial testing with was ATS, and I know of concern is some of those hydrocarbons, right? The polyfluora, something, the
PFAS.
The PFAS, yeah. Those are very bad and very famously bad. And so for me, I think it's obviously I don't want to spend the city's fortunes on on something that we don't have that we can't afford. But I think so far it seems that we're doing the right thing and we're being proactive about managing this problem and taking care of it as the best we can. And so I will be supporting this. Commissioner Rowan, I see your hand is up.
I just wanted to ask Director Moore, the projected tasks they're talking about, these seem reasonable. I mean, I know you can't predict what's going to happen. It depends. It's iterative, right? Depending upon what they find here, what they find there, what they find there. But does it seem reasonable to you, the tasks they're outlining? Or?
Yeah, from what we know currently, I think what they've laid out makes sense.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, it's a rough estimation of what we could be looking at, but yeah, I think it's a good roadmap. It's the best that we can get right now.
Thank you.
I apologize. I think I got kind of bumped out of the meeting there for a second on my internet connection. So George, unfortunately, I kind of missed what you said, but I think I got the gist of most of it.
Yeah, it just had to do with the roadmap they identified. It seemed pretty straightforward to me, but I'm not a, I'll go with Director Moore's, I just wanted to ask about it, that's all. It seems different than the last time because we get a sense of, the trajectory and what's going to take place. So I'm more comfortable with this than I was before.
Right. Commissioner Tolis, I see your hand is up.
Couple quick comments again, referring back to John Zhang's letter of June 5th of 2019. If all the commissioners remember, this all started from a tile that was running from this old landfill from the groundwater that was draining into the Chippewa River. Okay. Then the DNR said, well, this has got to be plugged. Well, the city went ahead and abided by it and plugged it. Now we're to the point of doing all this testing in this landfill. When initially, all we had to do was hook that tile and run it 250 feet into the waste treatment plant and take care of it. Well, no, that wasn't done. Because I asked Mr. Zhang, he says, well, we didn't think about it at that time. Well, and these things that are put in here right now are not reasonable, people. Investigate the extent of the landfill deposition area and the composition of the waste fill. This is a dump that's back from the 70s. There was no requirements that there are in place today. So we're going to go in there now, ruin the integrity, of this landfill, drill holes through it to bring up tests to show what's in the landfill. And I sent a memo out to everybody that was from the city of Ithaca that had a problem with their dump there. They were going and trying to get along with the DEQ and get this done. They're at the point now where they don't have any money and they have to dig this whole landfill up. And you know what the DEQ is telling them? That's your problem, not our problem. You'll pay for it or we'll go ahead and do it and you're going to wind up paying for it. So, I mean, there's got to be some kind of review on this. Because they cannot come in and start writing you the tickets, number one. They have to write something up and give you a directive or give you a citation. Then you have the option of going to the DEQ and having a hearing on it. And we're sitting here and, we're just trying to keep ahead with this. We're not getting ahead with it, people. They keep demanding more. And if you don't think that's the case, take a look at this report here. It's got a lot more items on it than it does now. We wanted to test the 9 wells. Now they wanted provisional another round of groundwater testing. Plus they want a determination of the thickness of the land cover and a test composition of what's on it. That was already approved 20 or 30 years ago. You can't sit there and tell us now you're going to sit there and follow the new regulations and put a cap on it now that abides by the regulations now, or we're going to find something in this dump that you couldn't have put on there before by regulation. It just doesn't make sense to me, people. And I will be voting no on this. And I think you're making a big mistake, and we're going to wind up in the same predicament Ithaca did. you're going to wind up with a multi-million-dollar cleanup. Because you're not getting ahead of anything. You're just burying yourself. Believe me, I've got experience in this area. If you don't think so, go ahead and vote yes on it. Burn some more taxpayer money up and see what kind of predicament you get in. And you'll be right in the same ballpark Ithaca is right now. They don't have money to clean and dig that dump up, and they're going to have to do it because the DEQ is going to make them do it. So just keep giving them more evidence and more basis to pursue this, and we're going to be in a big problem. Big problem. Because these companies doing the work, they're in the business of making money. They're not going to be in there and fight. Somebody should have fought this. Those two items shouldn't have been in there. If I'd have been at that meeting, I'd say, no, we're not going to go in there in this dump and drill holes in there to test the compositions of a dump that's 30 some years old, 30 or 40 years old. I think it was done in the 70s when they shut that down, if I'm not mistaken. But you've got my 2 cents on it.
Commissioner Gillis.
I agree with Commissioner Tolis, and I wish my fellow commissioners would give some credibility to someone who has went up against the DEQ or to protect his interest with what the DEQ was requiring or demanding or asking, not demanding, because right now we haven't had any directives. For the commission and our community members, we have a Superfund site that's probably what, 1,000 feet from our dump. It's on the north side of Pickard, where McGurk's Sand and Gravel is. Covers that whole area. It's one of the top 3 Superfund sites in the United States. We have tried to mitigate the influx of poisons from that Superfund site into the river by a silt wall. But this has been just done recently, I guess in the next decade, if you want to call that recent, from a Superfund site that's probably been there for 60 or 70 years and has traveled down our Chippewa River. And if you had been a lifelong resident like myself, you know, within the 59 years that I have lived here, there's been several times of flooding of the Chippewa River, enough to cover that Superfund site, and all that water went down the Chippewa River. And I have mentioned this before about how to differentiate if these toxins or these what they're finding in these samples are coming from the Superfund site, or are they coming from our old dump? And I didn't really get an answer from the other contractors that we had given money to do these testings. And I still don't know how they are going to differentiate between the contaminations on one of the top 3 in the United States Superfund sites that are here in Mount Pleasant on the north side of Pickard, right next to our river. If anybody would like to take a look at it, it's very disturbing and disappointing to take that road back to where the storage units are behind McGurk's and just look at that area next to our river. Look at the little island that was completely covered with toxins. So there is no way in the water and in these testings that you can definitively say that those are coming from our dump and not from the Superfund site that has been in existence for over a half a century and been contaminating our river. So it's just a rabbit hole to go down. And I really wish you would take some advice from someone who has gone up against the DEQ and has worked with the DEQ for 60 years of his life or 50 years of his life, and give him some credibility that he may have some prior experience on what we should be doing or what we should be not doing. So I would wish that you would take that as credible advice and that you would think this over of keeping putting taxpayer money into something that may not even be our problem. And I don't believe it is our problem. That dump was capped. It was, the integrity has been fine until this one pipe or two pipes were found. And then all of a sudden it's now we have to test everything, and we have to test wells that are in Union Township, and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, community members, of your taxpayer dollars. And this should be falling on the Superfund site that is right up the river, less than 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet from where our dam is. Thank you for listening.
Commissioner Elsager?
I guess I'd have a couple questions for Jason. One would be, what summaries did we get from the previous two contracts? And is this a new issue because of PFAS?
The summaries that we got from the first two contracts were the results of the tests that they did, and they resulted in contaminants of concern that exceeded the criteria. As to whether it's just about PFAS, it's not just about PFAS. There are a couple of other things that are in exceedance in those reports. And one of the what they're going to do in this next round, one of the things they're going to do is to try to determine how the shallow groundwater is flowing in that area. And so that may speak to the question of whether or not it's possible that this is coming from the other side of the river. If that were the case, then possibly we could figure that out. So.
Thank you.
Right. I don't see any other hands up for discussion or comments. And so, oh, I spoke too soon. Commissioner Ronan.
I apologize. I don't want to belabor this, but are they aware of the, I mean, these people are aware of the other Superfund site, right? I mean, they know that this is a complicated issue.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and they're going to do what they can to sort of determine what's what. And I mean, is this, and can I ask one more question that's unrelated to anything? Is this a Superfund site being evaluated? Is this being treated?
Yes, the Superfund site is under the control of the DEQ, and a lot of work has been done there. And the owner of that, MRP, is the one responsible for that. And they work with Eagle regularly on that and provide regular reports about the status of their remediation.
So these people can coordinate in some way. I mean, it's not like
Eagle's familiar with both sites.
As are the people we're hiring.
Yes.
Yeah, correct. And they have gotten the reports from that site, and they all the surveys and all that information, and so they've worked that into their plan.
Good questions. Without any other hands up, I think we can go to a roll call vote on the motion to approve the contract with MSG.
Right, Commissioner Alsteiger,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
No.
Commissioner Tolis,
Absolutely no.
Commissioner Ronan,
I'm sort of conflicted, but I'm assuming they're going to work together. So I'm going to vote yes, actually.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-2.
Okay. Motion passes. Next on our agenda is item number 15, which is originally on the consent calendar, and it is the resolution in support of final approval of the temporary traffic control order number 2-2020. Manager Riley, would you like to give a brief overview?
Yes, this has to do with parking lot 12, which is at the southwest corner of Broadway and Oak, as well as the parking lot to the north of the Borden building. Both of these are public parking lots. And as part of the agreement for the development of 410 West Broadway, it was agreed that overnight parking would be allowed in both of those parking lots for vehicles that are properly permitted for that overnight parking and pay the appropriate permit fees. And in order for us to be able to ticket for vehicles that are not properly permitted, we have to have a traffic control order on file in order to be able to do that. So we went through the process to put the temporary traffic control order in place, which is required to do. And that was actually in place for a longer period of time because the sign was not readily available when the lift station work was taking place by the parking lot 12. So now that that has been done and that parking lot has been open, we've passed the required time period for the temporary order. And so now we're bringing it to you this evening to finalize the order that makes it clear that overnight parking is allowed in both of those lots for properly permitted vehicles. And if they're not properly permitted, we would be able to ticket those. And this agreement to do that, or this process to do this, is one of our contractual commitments for the development of 410 West Broadway. So we're recommending you approve the final traffic control order.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. Open up the floor for motions and discussion. Commissioner Alsager.
Here, I guess I'm 3 for 3 here. Move to approve the resolution as drafted in support of final approval for traffic control order 2-2020.
Okay. And Commissioner Ronan.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the temporary traffic control order. I just had a quick question. If we voted against approving this, we would be in conflict with our contractual agreement with Michigan Community Capital, correct?
Potentially. I think the more important thing is that we would not be able to properly enforce requiring permits for those overnight parking vehicles.
Okay. Commissioner Gillis.
So 2 of our municipal parking lots downtown, now community members will be serving Parcel B's new development. And we are providing the parking for all those tenants. If we have 42 apartments and some of them are 2-bedroom, let's just do a ballpark of 60 cars, and that's low end of 60 cars, because not every, at least one person in every apartment's going to have a vehicle, if not 2 people that live in those studios, 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom. So we may have 60 cars now parking in our Borden building parking lot that we paid for, and we paid for again, and we're paying for again since 2005 to house the tenants next door. And my concern is, what happens when we get back to City Hall and we have community members that want to come into chambers and attend a city commission meeting, yet there's 60 cars parked behind City Hall to provide parking for the tenants of Mid-Michigan Capital.
I'm not sure if this is helpful or not, but the parking lot 12 has 64 spaces in it, and the parking lot to the north of the Borden building has 104 spaces.
And we already share some of those 104 spaces with Riverview, right?
No, I think that's outside of the ones that were transferred to Riverview when we made the flip between the parking lot up above versus the one below. I think that left us with 104, but I'd need to double check that, Commissioner Gillis, to make sure that's accurate.
So your thinking there's 104 behind the Borden building and there's over 60 across the street.
That's correct.
And so what if it starts to be a conflict for our community members to park at the Borden building when they want to attend a city commission meeting?
I guess if that were a conflict, there are other downtown parking spaces available either on the street or at town center that aren't too far away. So there are other opportunities for parking spaces nearby if that were a problem.
What time does overnight parking start? They could pull in anytime, right? They could park there all day, during the day, all night, and be sitting at the back side of our city hall parking lot.
That's correct, because there's no restrictions during the day at all.
Does anyone else see a problem with that? That our municipal parking lot to our city hall is going to be used by tenants for parcel B? I'm a little concerned about that. When I paid for this out of my taxes back from 2005, that parking lot was to supply our community members parking spaces to come into City Hall, to pay their taxes, pay their water bill, to talk to somebody in our staff. And I have a problem if the parking lot is completely full by tenants from parcel B and making our community members walk from uptown to get to their own City Hall building that they've paid for once, twice, 3 times now. And I only say that because it's a long, ongoing boondoggle rabbit hole that we went into in 2005 in litigation and monies for lawyers for 5 or 6, 10 years with J.E. Johnson. And we just constantly keep getting tasked with from this City Hall being refurbished and turned into a space to hold our meetings, yet it cost the city taxpayer. So my concerns are that I have problems if people want to come to chambers or even come up to City Hall, that they're not going to have a parking space behind City Hall that they've paid for because we're accommodating the development next door. So I don't know if anyone else has any problems with that we are supplying a municipal parking lot to our City Hall that's supposed to accommodate me when I need something from City Hall. And those parking spaces are now given for free. We are maintaining that for free for all the tenants. Well, for the developer. I mean, the tenants but for the developer, we're going to be maintaining those parking lots for his development and his 42 apartments that he's going to be making lots of money in because we gave him a tax abatement and we sold the property for what, 63, 65,000. I just don't know why we keep giving and giving and giving to this one development. And I have reservations because I think our City Hall parking lot should be reserved for the community members that need to use City Hall that they paid for. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
Manager Ridley, can you tell me how many parking lots have overnight parking available in the downtown area?
I don't know off the top of my head, Vice Mayor. Many of them allow for overnight parking. I was going back to one of our prior items to see if I could easily tell from the map that was included. It was with parking lot 6. Let me see if I can tell from that. Get my glasses up. From a quick look, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 6 other downtown parking lots that allow overnight parking.
Okay. And we do that because there are apartments above buildings, right?
Correct.
Okay. So by giving, and we had put this together with parcel B when we with the contract stating that we would allow that so that there would be enough parking for the tenants there. And because we have approximately between the two parking lots over about 160 roughly parking spaces, and I've never been at City Hall when the parking lot has been jammed full. Well, I'm glad you have, Commissioner Gillis, but I don't see, the chances of that having, if there's 42 apartments and us using 60 spaces, most people that are going to be in an urban apartment like that are probably either not going to have a car or have just one car between two if there's two people living there. But I don't see that problem really. And the fact that we've already promised this. So if it becomes an issue, we can bring it back up, but I don't see it as an issue at this time.
Commissioner Ronan. George, sorry.
I had some of the same questions about usage. I mean, I don't see either of those parking lots used that much, but they're also going to pay the fee, right? I have a couple slots I pay fees for in one of the local lots here. I mean, they're going to, right? They're not going to
Just for the only fee will be for overnight parking. There is no fee for daily parking in these two lots.
Oh, so how much is that? Do you know offhand? I mean,
I don't know.
But okay. So I don't know what I pay actually. I have no idea. Okay, but I mean, there's some fee anyway. Yeah, I don't know. Does that fee actually cover the cost of the lot? I mean, if you get the fee all the time, I mean, does it?
No, I'm sure it does not come close to covering the cost of the lot. It's just
no removal.
The fee is set more as a behavior modifier.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Tolis.
Thank you. I got to agree with Commissioner Gillis on this. I believe, is that parking lot, city lot 12 that's across from the project, from the building?
Parking lot 12 is the one at the corner of Broadway and Oak, yes.
Okay. And we have a doctor's office that's adjacent to that parking lot. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do when all these tenants are overnight parking that lot? Do you think they're going to get up at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning and move their vehicles out of that lot so the doctor's office can conduct business there? You don't think you're going to have a problem there? We are going to have a problem there. And not only that, you've eliminated 3 or 4 parking spaces because we had to move the lift station from the north side of Broadway back into the corner of that parking lot again, which eliminated 4 parking spots. I think we're going to have problems with this. There's no doubt in my mind.
Commissioner Alsager.
I'm going to be, excuse me, I'm going to be supporting this, and it's because I trust our city officials to put up signs for spots where overnight parking is not allowed, to allow for the businesses and the city hall that needs certain spaces. And that will still allow enough spaces for the residents. I don't foresee a problem.
Commissioner Gillis.
Thinking outside of the box, is there any way that we could allocate a portion of the City Hall parking lot that is closest to the parcel B that we're providing parking spaces, so that the entrance closer to the chambers, or, like we could allocate 20 spaces from behind City Hall, and then the rest of the tenants would have to park across the street? So we're not interfering with our community members that want to come into City Hall and don't want to park uptown in town center.
I would have to review the agreement that was already agreed to between the city and Michigan Community Capital. My recollection is that agreement leaves it pretty wide open and limits whether we can designate additional parking spaces or not. But we can look at that to see if that's possible. Having said that, I also think that once we get into this, if we find that there are some unintended consequences, it might be easier to have the discussions about potential amendments at that time instead of guessing what the consequences might be. So I think we always have the opportunity to go back and ask for an amendment to the contract. It just might be easier to do once we know how it's really working.
Commissioner Toles?
Answering Commissioner Gillis's question, looking at this traffic control order 2-2020, the bottom it says place overnight permit parking signs in the City Hall parking lot. Permits will be for every night. This includes the entire lot except for 3 reserved spaces for the City of Mount Pleasant DBW and 4 reserved spaces for City Hall tenants.
And I think that tracks with what the agreement said, is why that's worded that way.
Right, I think that's been a pretty thorough discussion. And I think we're okay to do a roll call vote on the motion to approve the temporary traffic controller 02-2020.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Toles,
No.
Commissioner Gillis,
No.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-2.
Okay, the motion is passed. Next is item number 16, which is consider a budget amendment for the Broadway street closure, which we talked about at our last work session. Manager Ridley?
Yes, as you mentioned, we talked about this at the last work session, and the general agreement that seemed to be reached was to ask us to bring forward the budget amendment to provide funding for both the amenity improvements that were recommended and potentially additional activities, assuming the public health order allows those additional gatherings. So the budget amendment memo has been included in your packet. That would be a not to exceed $52,000 cost. And it's dependent obviously on what activities we're able to have over the summer months. And we, as many of you mentioned, we recommended that the funding source be the Economic Initiatives Fund for this funding source, because the intent of it is to help the downtown businesses to be successful and to provide a safe gathering place for our residents. And so the only changes from what you saw at the work session is the estimated cost for the barricades has been reduced, because we followed up on Commissioner Toles's recommendation for getting some used barricades, and we're able to reduce the cost for that. And then we were able to receive an estimate on the cost of the overhead lighting. And so that's been included. So those are the 2 changes from what you saw in the work session packet. So we're recommending tonight that you consider the budget amendment of not to exceed $52,000 from the Economic Initiatives Fund.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. Commissioner Ronan?
I beat Commissioner Alsager. How's that? I move that we approve the budget amendment for the Broadway street closure.
All right. And Vice Mayor Perschbacher?
I will support that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the $52,000 budget amendment from the Economic Initiatives Fund. Any discussion? Commissioner Toles?
I'll not be voting on this as for a conflict of interest, as one of my companies has bid these used barricades out to the city.
Okay. Remind me, I think there's a process for someone who, like, we have to agree that Commissioner Toles has a conflict of interest. Is that correct?
if he states that he has a financial conflict of interest, he's automatically allowed not to abstain from the vote. If it's just a perceived conflict, then you have the right to vote on it and decide. But since he has an actual conflict with one of his companies, he automatically gets to abstain.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. And thank you, Commissioner Tolis, for just stating your conflict of interest. Commissioner Gillis?
Yes. I'm looking at some of these line items and picnic tables, 10 picnic tables, budgeted, and I know these are estimates of $9,000. We're buying picnic tables that are costing $900 each. I have some concerns about some of these prices and the allocation. Market umbrellas and bases are $6,750 for umbrellas. I did want to ask, are those umbrellas going to be taken in nightly?
Would it be helpful if Michelle, I think, is Michelle with us tonight?
Yeah, I just promoted her as into a panelist.
All right, thank you. Hi, Michelle.
Good evening. Good evening. I wasn't sure if I heard the question. I was being pulled into the meeting, so.
That happens. Thanks, Michelle, for joining us.
Sure, happy to. So I'm sorry, what was the question? Was it picnic tables?
Yeah, the picnic tables, 10 picnic tables allocated $9,000. $900 a picnic table seems kind of costly, but I know
I'm not going to disagree, but however, those are the same picnic tables we have in the parks. So I use the estimate that it was provided by the Parks Department to match the tables we currently have. So that is the actual cost.
And then the umbrellas, are those umbrellas going to be taken in nightly?
No, they were meant to stay down there all the time. They have a base that they would be screwed into, so they wouldn't, if you will, walk away.
Right. Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking of. So, and the Edison Lights, could you explain? Well, for one thing, I know it needs required approval from the property owners to string from one side to the other, and 15,000 plus the installation.
Correct.
That seems awful high for lights.
Well, that is a commercial grade light that's meant to stay out for, it's not the same level as what you would have on a patio where it's going to be on and off periodically throughout the week. This is a commercial grade lighting system. It is something that I am happy to price out, and if I can find a commercial system for less, make no mistake, I'm going to try and bring this in well below. But at this point, that's the estimate that I've been getting. These Edison lights are very popular right now, and they're, quite frankly, they're a little hard to get a hold of. But as you said, it would have to be in agreement with the property owner as well, because they would be attached to the buildings. I believe it's an eye hook. I mean, I have that exactly right, but I believe it's an eye hook.
Yeah. And they are a really cool ambience. I've seen them used in some of the Detroit areas, in alleys that make a welcoming space where they're setting out tables on the backside of restaurants in literally alleys for people to dine. But my concerns are haphazard. One person doesn't want it, you have them stretched, kind of funky, not like the picture that we're seeing in our packet where it's evenly draped and everyone's participating. But if you don't get buy-in from everybody, it's going to look pretty tacky if you only have 2 or 3.
Right. Well, we'd have to find some way to modify. That's an excellent point, and I'm hoping that all the property owners will buy into this. And I'm going to be meeting with the street department, as a matter of fact, tomorrow to find out if we have an option that we could run them off of the roof line and we don't have to go into the building. That might make it a little bit more palatable for folks who don't want something actually inserted into their building. So
okay.
Hopefully.
And then the electricity is going to be somehow connected to already our electrical grid that's for our street lights, our tree lights?
Correct. So actually it can run off of two separate locations. So there's a pole currently at, get my bearings here, the northeast corner of Main and Broadway next to Downtown Discount that currently has one of the old Wi-Fi systems on it. It was put there because that pole has an electrical draw on it. Additionally, around the corner in front of Midori Sushi, it has a 16-foot pole, and it has electricity at the top that we can plug into as well. So we don't have to run it down to the street and have it, if you will, an attractive nuisance for someone to, let's say, unplug it.
Right. But we will be paying for the electrical bill.
Yes, they are LED light bulbs though. That's one of the reasons also for, if you look at LED, you can buy, if you will, regular incandescent version of Edison Lights. They are much cheaper, but the light bulbs don't last as long and there's a higher electrical charge. This particular system is a commercial grade with LED lights.
Okay. And they would not be on all day, I would.
No, not all day. We can set them to what we have an eye system. So when it gets, if you will, dusk, they would come on just like our light poles do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then be on all night.
Correct. Or we could set it on a timer perhaps and shut it off at 1 o'clock in the morning, let's say, something like that. We can change that depending on maybe the time of year and things like that. Mm-hmm.
Because also I have concerns about some of the tenants in those second and third story apartments that are going to front Broadway. And I know when they put lights all the way down Broadway, I can literally see the lights and I'm 3 houses off Broadway, right? And I can see how much light is coming from the lighted sidewalk all the way down to Bradley. So if that was a bedroom facing window, and I don't know if there are, I haven't been into every apartment.
There are roughly half of the second stories in that 1 block stretch. It's an even split between office and apartments. So, and again, that's something that the property owners are going to be factoring into their decision, of course.
Sure.
Yeah.
And those are some of my concerns. It seems like sometimes the prices to municipalities seem a lot higher than a regular residential price.
Well, and in this case, I will tell you, I don't, when I call and get quotes, I don't necessarily say I'm with the city of Mount Pleasant when I'm calling and getting estimates. I'm not going to disagree with that.
Okay, great. Haggle where you can, Michelle.
Whenever possible.
And thank you for doing what you do downtown. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Those are good questions there. I don't see any other hands up. I just want to say that I really like the direction we're headed with this. I think that we're doing some placemaking, which is going to benefit our community, our downtown. And I know last year, some of our businesses really appreciated that closure, and a lot of community members gave us a lot of positive feedback on it. And so happy to sort of take one step further into that realm and approve this budget amendment. So at this time, I think we can vote on the motion to approve the budget amendment of not to exceed $52,000 from the Economic Initiatives Fund. And just so we're clear, Commissioner Tolis has a conflict of interest and will not be voting on this.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, great. Motion has passed. Next on our agenda is item number 18, which is to receive information on the neighborhood enhancement grant liens and to consider an update to the program parameters. And I think Doug Lobsinger is with us as well tonight for any questions we may have, but Manager Ridley, if you'd like to give us an overview.
Yes, at your last meeting where you approved the grant acceptance of the $30,000 and approved the program parameters, two questions came up during that discussion that, as we did some additional research on them, we decided to bring back to you for consideration for action. And I'm going to cover both questions at the same time, but I think for simplicity's sake, it would be a good idea for you to take two separate actions on them, because one of the proposed changes applies to the program from last year, and one of the changes applies to this year's program. So I think it would be cleaner if you took two separate actions. So the first question had to do with last year's program. And the question was if we would be able to offer to those property owners who had the projects that were in excess of $7,500, if we could offer them the opportunity to do a 25% owner contribution on that piece above $7,500 instead of filing the liens for the work, which is what the original program parameters were. And the reason for that question is the new program that we're offering this year, we recommended that the liens not be put in place, and instead we have a required owner contribution for those higher cost projects. So we did some looking, and the liens of the 4 properties who met that threshold from last year's program have not been filed yet. So we do have the opportunity to go back to those 4 property owners, if you would like us to, and offer them the option of paying 25% of the amount over $7,500 so that that lien would not have to be filed. So if you're interested in pursuing that, we've provided a motion that would give us the authority to go back and make those changes to those 4, or make that offer to those 4 property owners. The second question that came up during the discussion has to do with the new program. And the question was whether property owners who received a grant last year would be able to reapply again this year under the new program. And we indicated that there was nothing in the parameters that would prohibit that. But as we looked at it further, we think that was likely an oversight, that we probably should have recommended to you that that be prohibited, because our plan for the second round was to impact as many properties as we could. And many of the changes that were proposed were with that thought in mind. So our second recommendation for you is to change this year's program parameters to include a statement that would indicate anyone who received a grant in last year's program would not be eligible to apply this round. Now, certainly we're hopeful we may have future rounds in future years, and we can reconsider that for future rounds. But we think for this year, we think those 10 properties should not be eligible to apply for this year's program. So we drafted the motion for you to consider that if you're so willing to do so.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Manager Ridley. And I think we should first take up probably the issue from last year with the liens. And then we can move on to the second topic. Commissioner Toles?
I'll make a motion, to authorize staff to contact 4 property owners with projects greater than 7,500 with an offer of not filing a lien if a 25% owner contribution is paid on the project portion over 7,500 within 1 month of the contract.
And Vice Mayor Perschbacher?
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the amendment. Okay, any discussion? Okay, I just want to say that I think this is fair, because this is what we're doing for this year, and it's, giving those people an opportunity to avoid that lien if they wouldn't want that on their property. So with that, I think we can go to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Toles,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, motion has passed. And then the second topic is now the program parameters for the neighborhood enhancement program for this year. Commissioner Tullis.
I'll make a motion to move to add a program parameter for the current neighborhood enhancement program, which would indicate that properties funded in the first round of the grant awards would not be eligible to apply for a second round grant.
Commissioner Perschbacher or Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
I will second that.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to approve the new parameters. Any discussion? I see Commissioner Tullis, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think this is the only fair thing to do, Mayor. This will allow the rest of the people that didn't have a chance to apply to get any remodeling done they want to get done.
Sure. Commissioner Gillis.
We're only giving one round of grants per year. And so if someone can't apply for the second round, what about next year if we are lucky enough to get another grant through MISHDA and we allocate the money from funding so they could turn around and skip 1 year, but then apply for another grant the next year?
That's a decision you'd be able to make. If we do a third round, you would be able to decide at that time if you want to keep that parameter in place, that if they've received one before, they wouldn't be eligible, or if you're willing to change it at that time. You can decide each round what parameters you want.
Okay. I feel more comfortable if one, as a person wins or, gets allocated the grant, because it's pretty much a lotto, that we try to serve as many people as possible rather than one person getting more than one grant. I really don't think that's fair, unless, of course, we didn't have any applicants and then we had to open it up for maybe other people previously that were allocated up to 10 grand. But I have concerns that one person may be picked when you pick it out of the hat, because like I say, it is a lotto. That my concerns are that we need to spread this money around in as much as we can. So thanks for that clarification, Ms. Ridley.
Okay. I think we can go to a roll call vote on the motion to approve the program parameter.
Commissioner Tullis,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher. Oops, excuse me. Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, great. Motion is passed. Next on our agenda is item number 25, which is to consider appointments to the various boards and commissions as recommended by the Appointments Committee. And I will hand this over to Commissioner Alsager, who is the chairperson.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Vice Mayor Perschbacher. She kind of took the bull by the horns and started the procedure. And I don't know how many phone calls she made, but I made just one. And so we have two for you to consider tonight that we have. Let me see, I don't have it right in front of me. Hold on. Let's see. I'm sorry, my phone's been ringing off the hook tonight, so it might be a little noisy. 117. Okay, here's our two. Mark Kowalczyk for the Cultural and Recreational Commission for a partial term that would end December 31st of 2023. And then for the Parks and Rec Commission, Vincent Mumford for a partial term ending at the end of this year, December 31st of 2021. And those are the two we have for you tonight. So I'd like to move that we accept those two nominations.
Commissioner Ronan.
I'd like to second that. We accept the nominations.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the two appointees. Any discussion? I just want to thank the appointees for their willingness to serve on our boards. And actually, I just sort of recently met Dr. Mumford, who will be on the Parks and Recreation Commission, and he's a very nice gentleman, and it'll be exciting to see what he can bring to that board. So with that, I think we can go to a roll call vote on the appointees.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
that was Commissioner Gillis.
I couldn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
and Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, that's great. Motion is passed, and we have two new commission members. Next, we'll move on to announcements on city-related issues and new business. I would just like to say, obviously, there's been a lot of news about our community being high in COVID numbers compared to the rest of the nation. And I know that there's been a lot of conversations between our organization and the partner organizations about those issues. And I think it's the strategy, and I don't want to speak for them, but my understanding is that we're still committed to encouraging people getting vaccinated and wearing masks and practicing social distancing. And although there seems to be some light at the end of the tunnel, we are clearly not out of this pandemic quite yet. And so I really would impress upon people that they take those precautions and do your research and consider getting vaccinated as soon as you can. It's really important. I think it'll be the key to us getting back to our normal social lives and also helping our local economy getting back on its feet and really providing sort of the basics that we need to function as a city and as a community. And with that being said, because of all our turmoil, we have a lot of great need in our community. And so if you have the time and the resources, a lot of our nonprofits really need volunteers and donations in terms of our food bank, our homeless shelter, ICRH, Clothing Inc., and others. And so if you can consider giving some time up, greatly appreciate it. I'd also like to mention one more thing. The League of Women's Voters is giving a presentation on the 14th. They're doing a town hall. I believe, what time is that? I believe it's at 6 o'clock. At the Commission on Aging is hosting that, and it's a virtual town hall, and so you'll be able to attend. Let me make sure on that time real quick. It's actually at 7 o'clock. I'm sorry, I misspoke. But that League of Women Voters Town Hall is talking about communities of interest in the redistricting commission that's going to redistrict a lot of our legislative districts at the state and federal level. And so they're talking about how to organize and sort of get the attention of the redistricting commission to draw districts that make sense socially. And so even if you're just halfway interested, something you should certainly attend and encourage others to do so. That's all I really have for tonight. Commissioner Gillis?
Yes, I'd like to invite our residents to submit an application for any of our several boards and commissions. You can find the applications with the descriptions of our boards at mountpleasant.org, mt-pleasant.org, under boards and commissions. And the rosters can also be found there and what time they meet and the days. Some of them only meet every 2 or 3 months. Some of them meet on a monthly basis. So you could, I'm sure, find something that could fit into your schedule. But we welcome all applications from our community members and we encourage your participation year round. So just being that we don't have a vacancy on your board that you may be interested, please put your application in anyways. We have several people that resign or move out of the area, and we also have several vacancies at the moment. I also want to give the information on how to get a vaccine here in our area. If you go to Central Michigan District Health Department, that is cmdhd.org, they have a link there. We are vaccinating anyone 16 and above. It doesn't matter if you have underlying conditions or all you have to do is meet the guideline of age. So you can pick an appointment on several days and in several different venues. So please get out there and get online, sign up yourself, sign up your mother, sign up your kids if they're 16 and older. The more community members we get vaccinated, the more we can have immunity and the more we can stop this virus in its tracks. So please, community members, help us get over this increase. And the vaccine is no cost to you. Even if you don't have insurance, you can still get a vaccine with no cost to you. So please go to that website and sign up for your vaccine. And I thank you in advance for doing this for our community and the safety of each other. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Well, without any other hands up for announcements or new business, we can go into our second public comment section on agenda and non-agenda items. And if you're with us by phone, you can hit *9. And if you're with us by Zoom, you can go to the bottom of your screen and hit the raise hand button. And I just ask that you state your name and your address for the record. Manager Ridley, did we have any emailed comments to us?
No, sir, we did not.
Okay. Well, I am seeing, looks like all staff members in our attendees section currently. And so I will close the public section or public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. We do have a work session tonight covering 2 topics: the Water Resource Recovery Facility bonding next steps, or formerly known as our water treatment, our wastewater treatment plant, and then our Oprah district and policy. And so we'll take about a 5-minute break and reconvene for those discussions.
Yeah, what's up? Yes. think I should. You know. Yeah. No, it just mentioned that they found another contract and saved $3,000 and purchased them for $600 for used ones. Well, I'm not going to vote on it. And then somebody goes, "Oh yeah, well, Tola sold those to him." You know, I says, no, I'm not. I shut the video off, but you know, you have to go on a conflict on that. I says, I have one of the companies that supplied the bid for those used ones, so. What time's it now? 9:03. I don't think it should be. It shouldn't be more than an hour, I hope.
one more. Okay.
I'm here when you need me, okay?
All right. Thank you. All right. It looks like everybody's back. And so start right off. I think a first topic we're going to talk about is the water resource recovery facility bonding and the next steps. There's obviously in the packet, there was a big summary of all the different projects that are being looked at and why they need to be done and roughly what they're going to cost. I would open up the floor to any questions. Nancy would probably like to give an overview before I do that.
Well, yes. Yes, I want to keep this brief because this is really one of those issues that we really don't need any direction from you tonight, but it's an opportunity to address any concerns you have because I know none of you have been through a bonding process with us before. So this will all be new for you. So we thought we should give you a heads up about what is happening and where we're heading with it. The wastewater treatment plant was originally built in 1954, and we did major upgrades to it in both 1982 and 2002. And our last bonds from that last upgrade were paid off in 2019. We paid them off early because we refinanced them. And it is very typical to have outstanding debt or outstanding bonds on both water and wastewater systems throughout the entire country because the capital investment is so high and the costs are so much that it's better to spread those out over time, kind of like you do with your home mortgage. And so for us to not have any outstanding debt right now on our wastewater plant is actually an anomaly. You typically always have outstanding debt. But we were holding off on doing it because we wanted to make sure we knew what replacements really were needed and what upgrades needed to be done. And we first got some information on that when we did the SAW grant analysis that was funded by the state. And that came back and told us that there were approximately $15 million of replacements and upgrades that should be done. We then moved forward with our projects last year that included the chemical feed process and the UV light project. And we learned more about our plant during that time and different ways to process the waste. And then last year, you'll recall, you approved an engineering study to do a complete analysis of all of our components of the plant to give us a better idea of their status and what the future might be for those. So based on all of that information now, we think we have a pretty good list that was included in your work session packet of the replacements and upgrades that are needed in the near term. And when I say in the near term, we would start on those either this year or next year, but it would likely take at least 3 years to get through all of those capital projects. And in order to do that, we would have to go out and borrow money. And the way a municipality borrows money is through the issuance of bonds, which is a very regulated, complex process. And so, as I indicated, our current estimates are around just under 17 million, but we would still be fine tuning those numbers with engineers because none of that has been designed yet. So we would be fine tuning that and working with a financial advisor to determine the timing of those and when we would do, when we would issue the debt and receive the funds. So that's kind of the high level overview of why we need to do the project and what we're looking to do over the next 3 years or so. Tim Middleton, who was our prior water resource recovery superintendent and is now the assistant DPW director, is with us if you have any questions about those projects that we have in our near-term list. and he can go over those briefly if you have any questions. And then Marianne is with us because our next step would be to send out RFPs for professional services for 2 experts that we need to help us through this process. So she's prepared to give you a brief overview of what that would look like and when those would be coming to you for consideration. So with that, I will turn it over to Tim in the event that any of you have questions on the listing of projects that we included in your work session packet. Let's start with that to see if you have any questions on that before Marianne talks about our next steps.
Thank you, Nancy. I had a couple of questions, so I guess I'll start off. And I don't know that they're necessarily vital questions, but they're more out of, I guess, maybe my curiosity. And one thing that I think that I was wondering, and you kind of brought it up, was what was the, because it's referenced several times throughout the packet, is the time frame or the lifetime for the project. And so that's what we're looking at, is the 3 years, because
that's our best guess, but again, we would need to work with a financial advisor to make sure that's doable with the use of the funds and so forth. But we're thinking it's a 3-year construction process.
Okay. I guess I'll just start. The city's asset management plan, and I guess in there it showed that there has been an increase of flow to the water resource recovery facility since then, so the 17 and 18. And I guess I was wondering what's the likely cause of that?
Tim, do you want to address that based on the septic receiving station?
Yeah, we've taken about an extra 5 million in septage right now, but the flow bounces up and down quite a bit dependent on the amount of wet weather conditions we get. So in 17, we had a really big flow. It was such a wet year. Last year and this year, less so. In fact, the conditions have been fairly dry. So that has affected our flow as well. So it really depends on several factors. CMU, of course, has impacted our flow, and so it moves up and down dependent on those kind of things.
And Tim, can you give a perspective of the amount of revenue we get from that septic receiving station?
Last year, I believe we took in approximately $360,000 in septage. It's difficult to treat, but it is very revenue accretive to us. It's been a good program. It's good for us, and it's really good for the communities that surround us that are using septic tanks. I know you're familiar with Beale City and the amount of septage that goes into the river over there and stuff. So it's a program that is not only good for us financially, but it's good for the community as well.
How does that work, Tim? Do people get their septic tanks, somebody comes by and hauls the waste out of the septic tank, and then they bring that to us and we treat it?
Yep. So they bring it to us. We have a rudimentary septage receiving station that we built. Don't hold me to this number, but approximately back around 2005 or so. And we started out by accepting septage on a pilot receiving program with the state. Over time, that's continued to increase. It's really increased in the last 2 to 3 years. All for various reasons. Yep, we take it in the plant. One of the problems with it is that as we get it now, we get it in slug loads, and it's difficult to treat that way because it flows through the plant in that manner as well. So you'll see septage receiving improvements in there. And part of that would be to build a station that meters and puts that flow into a tank that's already within the plant, and then spreads that nutrient load out across the treatment facility, so it's less of an impact on the plant itself.
Okay, thank you. The UV treatment, it was the part where they're talking about the aerator, and then I kind of got the impression that the UV treatment it makes the aeration in the aerator not as necessary. Is that true?
I would have to look back at that. I'm sorry I don't recognize that portion of it, but there really is no impact between the aeration and the UV. You might be referring to the fact that it doesn't go down the original existing cascade and bypasses it. But that does not seem to have had any impact in our dissolved oxygen content, which was our expectation.
Okay, that might be it. Yeah. And then I know there's kind of a big question mark about the rotating biological contractors, right? And how we would replace that.
Yep, those are the big ticket item in the room. We have over time, and I don't have the exact number because I don't have some of the history, but we have probably lost 8 or 9 of those. They're very expensive to replace. Most of the industry has moved away from them. We've been able to buy a couple used ones from people who are getting rid of them as well. And those have kept us moving, but all 24 RBCs have been turning every minute of the day since the day they were installed, and they are well beyond their life cycles. In fact, we've had other plants express surprise that we're still running with them even. So they've been good to us in terms of value, but they are definitely at end of life position. So what we're talking about replacing them with is a modified activated sludge process. There are several varieties of this, and so I've expressed it as an MBR, a membrane bioreactor, which is essentially something similar to RO filters in a tank with activated sludge around them. In this case, they would probably be modified to treat high ammonia loads and low BOD loads, because the existing towers do a pretty good job of cleaning up BOD as they are. But essentially, it would be a small activated sludge process with filtration. Okay. And there are several ways to get there, but that's an example of.
Yeah. And then I guess my last question was really about, the problem with the nitrogen and moving to, I think, the trickling filter oxidation towers. Would we still use some of that spent lime from the water treatment plant or water treatment facility after that upgrade, or we probably wouldn't need that anymore?
We have experimented with that. We have some concerns about it coating the oxidation tower media and adding weight to it, and it adds solids to our biosolids as well. And so while it worked okay, there are some unknowns with that. A portion of this plan would add some system to be able to add alkalinity to the treatment train when we needed it. And we have found that our ability to treat ammonia is directly related to our lack of alkalinity in the water. So in that improvement process is something to address that. And although that hasn't been spelled out specifically, that would be more accurately laid out in the design phase.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tim. Thanks for your time and those answers. It was really interesting reading through all those projects, because it kind of brought me back to biology and chemistry class and looking up different types of bacteria and stuff. So it was kind of cool. I really enjoyed it. But I'll hand it over to Commissioner Gillis.
Well, I'm going to leave all that techie stuff to you, Tim.
Try to keep it in a box.
Yeah, it was dry. Those pages didn't even need numbers.
I know.
Okay, I got more general questions. Has Nottawa come online where we're processing their sewage?
They have not. The last I had heard is they anticipate being connected to us by mid-June. I don't know that necessarily means they'll be pumping wastewater to us by that point, but their consent order, I believe, says they have to be in flow by December 21st, I believe. So if they stay on track, I expect they'll be pushing wastewater to us somewhere between there and December.
Okay, great. And roughly, I know we're not going to make millions of dollars, but any of the profits, are we going to have enough margin that we may be able to offset some of the bonds, or is that just so little it doesn't make a difference?
From Nottawa?
Yes.
I would say in the bigger scope, it's not a very big part of the total pie. We won't be treating it as a loss.
Okay.
When we set the rates with Nottawa Township, we set them at a rate to cover our expected costs, but we didn't include any profit in that, quote unquote profit in it.
Okay. Okay. And just a general question, do any of the street sewers run to the water plant? I know some of them are diverted directly into the river. But do you know how much do you process from our streets?
Very little. We don't have any combined sewers, so our storm sewer and sanitaries are completely separate from each other. We do have some infiltration and inflow from old clay leads and stuff like that. And that's normal in any system, but the tighter we can make it, the better over time. And so if you were to ask Jason, he would tell you about our relining campaigns and stuff like that we do to minimize that.
Okay. So
some pumps.
So as of right now, the street sewers go where?
It goes to the river.
Okay. To the river untreated.
Correct. Other than there's catch basins to try to catch the sediment before it gets to the river.
Because a long time ago in the past, wasn't it? I mean, decades ago, you were processing street.
No, prior to Tim can probably speak to this better, but prior to the 50s when the plant was put in, it all went to the river, right?
Correct.
Oh, that's disparaging. Okay. Okay.
We didn't have a plant until the 50s, and even in the 50s, it was primary treatment only. So they settled out the solids, put some chlorine in it, and sent it to the river. It wasn't until the passage of the Clean Water Act in the 70s that almost any municipality started to do secondary treatment where nutrient removal began.
Okay. And when people bring in their septic tanks, just an off question, are most of those services local, or are we getting and I would say local as in central Michigan?
Everything we get to central Michigan area.
Okay. Nobody from like Bay City or Grand Rapids are bringing their sludge or sewage to get processed?
Very rarely. Most people don't want to haul it that far because they can take it to other places. Very occasionally somebody will be in a pinch and bring a load over or something, but it's really rare.
Okay. So most of it's local. And
yeah.
It's competitive. You've looked at prices elsewhere in similar sized municipalities to see if we're competitive.
Yeah. I would say we're maybe even high compared to some.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
That's really all over the place price-wise.
Probably, yeah, yeah. And last question, and I don't know if you'll be able to help me because I don't know if in 2017, we had the flood.
Yes.
It overwhelmed our plant. And we unfortunately lost some sewage. And I don't know if you were with us during our regular meeting when we were discussing, of course, the landfill and what they're finding in it. So I know it's a sticky question and it's off the wall and off the cuff. And if you have no idea, I completely understand. And maybe other staff might be able to help. But when that spillage happened, was there any mitigation or testing to see, if that stuff's gone or that those contaminants that overflowed might end up showing up with all the testing that we're doing the landfill, which is right next to you guys, right? I mean, you can throw a rock and hit the landfill from our water treatment plant.
So when we have an overflow, It is because the sewers are taking in so much water from off the roads and through manholes and sump pumps that we just simply cannot hydraulically put it through the plant fast enough. And so that wastewater, when it comes through, is 99% rainwater. So it's almost very clean to begin with, but we do provide settling. We do get some secondary treatment. We do chlorinate it as it goes through, and then it goes into our retention basin, which is basically a polishing pond to remove any remaining sediment that we can get out of it before it flows to the river. When that happens, that automatically initiates our internal program of sampling upstream and downstream to compare what's coming to us and what's going by us. And we've never seen any remarkable difference between those two results. And we do that for 10 days typically.
Okay. And so there was no real testing like DEQ or anybody got involved in, because I'm sure it was happening everywhere, right? It wasn't just Mount Pleasant that was over flooding. Sewage plants were flooding everywhere. And I know that was just these are two different things, but they're actually right next to each other. That incident and now what we're finding in the, some of the samplings. And I'm wondering if there was any connection with some of the things they're finding, if it could be related to the overflow or the flooding of the wastewater plant.
I would say no, Lori.
I appreciate that because that's way out of my realm, Tim. So that's why I just thought I'd throw it at you because it's way out of my wheelhouse. But okay. Well, I appreciate your help with those questions. Thanks, Tim. And you're doing a great job.
Thank you. I have great staff.
Yes, you do.
Commissioner Toles?
Commissioner Toles, during the break, you got muted, I believe. So on your bottom left corner, you'll have to unmute before, there you go. Thank you.
Tim, couple quick questions. Commissioner Gillis asked you the one there, and I think you already answered it. That most of the waste haulers coming in there are from Isabella, Clare County area.
Yeah, we get some stuff out of Midland County. The majority of it's out of Isabella. Some comes from Clare. We get some haulers that are coming in from Farwell and stuff, but I would generally call it the mid-Michigan area.
And there's really no regulations on what waste haulers we can allow to come into our plant and dump.
No, we can prohibit it, and we can draw a radius from which we won't accept septage. So as long as we can take it and it's good for us, we'll take it. But if at any point we have to, we'll restrict that radius.
Okay. My second question is on the sewage that's coming in there off these vac trucks that are bringing this in. Now, where does this go when it goes into our system? Does it go like into a holding area, or does it go?
Currently, it just mixes with our influent stream coming in from the city. So it's got some dilution built into it, and then it passes directly into the plant with all the rest of the incoming influent.
And it goes from there to the holding tanks then?
It goes right into the treatment process.
Okay, thank you.
We don't really have any holding tanks per se. We have the retention basin, and we only use that in emergencies or in times when we're servicing the plant.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Tim before Marianne talks briefly about the two requests for proposals? Why don't you go ahead, Marianne?
Okay, well, not nearly as exciting of the biology of a wastewater plant, but the bond issuance is a complicated process that fortunately we don't do very often. So we will be proposing to hire experts to help us with that. And there will be two experts. We will be looking for a financial advisor. And what the financial advisor does is they help us structure the bond sale, working with the engineers to make sure that we have the timing of the bonds coming in is proper when it's a 3-year construction. They work with the rating agencies to help us get a better rating by providing great data for them for looking at our community and rates. If we have to buy some insurance, they'll do that sort of stuff. And then the second professional we'd be looking for would be a attorney who specializes in municipal bonds. Our current attorney firm has attorneys that do that, but it's a very specialized thing that you know all the ins and outs of doing what's called an official statement and all the legal documents that are required for issuing municipal bonds. So we will be preparing an RFP for those two services and bringing that back to you, probably your second meeting in May. And that will help us with structuring the bonds, as I said, and working through the process. Any questions?
And the costs for those two consultants are generally covered by the bond issuance. So we may have to out of pocket pay those, but then we're reimbursed from the bonds.
All the bond issues that Nancy was part of them, and I've been here at some of them, they have binders that are like yay thick of legal documents when you get done with the process of going through all of it. And then you, of course, have what the engineers come up with for that portion of the project too. But it's customary in the business, since we have finance professionals, but not finance professionals who are well schooled in bond issues. It's a knack all of its own. Oh, and I should mention
Mayor,
too,
you're muted.
I was going to say, I should mention that we have professionals that we work with on our refunding bonds, but we feel that since it's been a while since we've gone out for a proposal for those, that we should ask the different professionals for proposals so we can make sure that we're getting the most affordable option.
Thank you, Marianne. Commissioner Ronan?
I never thought to ask, but I assume the city has a high rating, right? I mean, we have a AAA rating or something like that. Is that correct?
We have a rating that's different ratings. You have a general obligation bond rating, which is with bonds that are paid for with tax dollars, which is our board and building bonds. Then you have a rating for your water bonds that are based on your water revenue. So this will be a different rating based on the water recovery. So you can't just say we have one bond rating, you have a different bond rating, but we should have a very favorable bond rating because of our history.
Thank you.
And if you don't, then you look at buying insurance, and then that's how the financial advisor can help you balance that. Do we buy insurance or go with a higher rate?
Is there any sense of like what we could expect in terms of an interest rate in total cost?
No, the interest rates right now should be favorable, but that's about all I can say at this point.
Yeah, okay.
And based on what the interest rates are and what the actual bond issue ends up being, as indicated in the operating budget, we likely will be looking at rate adjustments for the sewer fund as we phase this in. But it's too early to be knowing exactly what those will be, because we have to know what the actual costs are, and we have to look at what funding sources we have internally within the water resource recovery area to allocate toward this. So it's premature to know what those rate increases will be, but you should go in eyes wide open knowing we will be talking about rate adjustments after those bonds are issued.
Commissioner Gillis?
And that would include Nottawa having a rate increase?
Yes, their rates are tied to whatever our rates increase by.
Okay.
So our next step would be to issue those requests for proposals. And as Marianne indicated, that would come to you probably the end of May. And then we'll start working through the process with those professionals and have a better timeline to be able to bring back to you about what the next steps would be. So it will be a fun process.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Toles?
Manager, really, you talked about the fees when you sent out for these proposals, the engineering and legal fee. Is that put out front, that number from these proposals?
The financial advisor and the legal fees, yes, are put out front. They would tell us what they would charge for the process. And it's typically a flat dollar amount, but sometimes they may do it on a per hour basis, but we would be able to evaluate that as part of the request for proposal process.
Thank you.
Any other questions related to the bond issue? Oh, Commissioner Gillis.
Since this is my first rodeo on bonds, what's the ballpark in the past that has run with legal and like $100,000?
The two of them combined are probably getting close to that number, Lori, but probably less than that. But it's been a number of years since we've done an original bond issue. So probably 15 years ago was the last one we did. So I probably shouldn't be saying that because I don't know what the current market rates are. But I think the last one we did 15 years ago, it was around probably $60,000 for the two of those combined.
Thank you.
So it's probably much higher than that now.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions about the bond issues and water recovery facility? Except how to become a bond attorney. All right. Next, we have the Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act, or OPRA, district and policy. I'll hand this over to Nancy for some overview. We've kind of talked about it briefly at some other work sessions, but.
So yes, there's really two pieces to this that we talked about as part of the downtown study that was previously shared with you. And one is to get a policy on the books that would outline the types of projects that the City Commission would be willing to consider in possibly granting an OPRA. But and OPRA stands for Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act. And so each of those, even though you have a policy on the books, each would have to apply to you individually to request a OPRA on their actual property. And they would have to provide you information about why their property qualifies, which the city assessor would have to confirm, and what they intend to do with their property. And then you get to evaluate whether you're willing to recommend the tax abatement. And if so, it then goes to the state tax commission at the state level, and they also have to approve it. And the way that an OPRA works is it looks at what the value is of the property before the rehabilitation takes place and freezes that value. So the property owner continues to pay taxes on that value for the specified period of time. And any increase in value, they don't have to pay the taxes on until that abatement expires, which is anywhere from 6 to 12 years. And so what happens is you continue to get the same taxes, you give up the growth for either 6 or 12 years, and then you get 100% of the value after that. And so what we've prepared for you tonight, or what Michelle has prepared for you, is a draft of what the policy might look like if you wanted to go down that road, to have something on the books to give some clarity to potential people who may be applying for that. And then secondarily, there's also a recommendation about going ahead and creating a district that would entail the entire downtown area, where the tax finance authority is. And what that does is it just saves a step in the process. So if a property owner wants to apply for one, they wouldn't have to have the district created. That would already be done. All they have to do is apply for their individual property to determine if it qualifies and if it meets your criteria. So it saves one step in the process. So there's really two things we're looking for feedback from you on tonight: is the draft policy, and then whether you're interested in going forward with creating the district. And in both cases, we would have to bring action to you for you to take on those, but we wanted your feedback before we brought it for consideration. So I think I outlined some questions on the agenda, Mayor, if you want to go through those.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to that front page again. So are there any questions on the basics of how Oprahs work? Commissioner Ronan?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I mean, the main question I'd have is, it doesn't have to be 6 or 12 years, right? I mean, the commission can set that time frame. Is that correct?
That's correct. It can be up to 12 years. Yeah, in the policy, we recommended 6 or 12, but you're right, you have authority over that.
Yeah, I just wanted to share it. They listed 201 South University that I'm intimately familiar with for some reason. I don't know, that because we did get an Oprah. And I can tell you that the tax capture from that property before I picked it up was 0. It had never generated any tax revenue. They gave me an abatement, I think for 5 years. So I paid about $3,000, $4,000 a year in taxes on the property. That abatement ended in 2013, and I started paying $23,000 for 2013. And I fought with the city a little bit, and I think now I'm paying probably $19,000, close to $20,000 a year. So you go from a property that's generating very little income, and it's true. For a couple years, I got some tax abatements as I put $200,000 or $300,000 into the building to get it up to snuff, to get it the way I wanted. But now, in perpetuity, the building generates $20,000 a year in tax revenue. I mean, I'm just so thrilled that the city is considering using this procedure for downtown. It's going to, I think it will encourage all sorts of investments in people in their buildings. And yes, so that, you set the tax base is what it is for 3 or 4 years, 5 years, however long. And then bingo, the tax rate increases and the city makes a lot of money. I remember when I came to the city commission, they had initially voted no, and I was leaving the room because I looked at the numbers. I couldn't rehab the building without that Oprah. And if they had declined the Oprah, I would have walked away and it probably would be a parking lot. I don't know. It was on the market for years and years and years. So I mean, sometimes when people are doing stuff and then they had a second vote and they awarded it, it was complicated. But, I think, many times when people are making investments in these properties, it is sort of nickel and dime stuff. I mean, you get to a point where you take a look at it and say, hey, if I get this, I can afford to do it. If I don't, I won't. I'd really strongly encourage us to think about it. So I'll be quiet now. I think it's a win for everybody.
And Commissioner, you made a good point that I should have mentioned. It's not just city taxes that are abated. It's all of the local taxes that are abated. So those numbers that he was quoting include the county, IRIDE, all of those taxing entities. So it applies to all of the local taxes.
I wanted to add though.
Can I add something real quick though? But the taxes are set at the current rate though. It's you don't go down below what you're currently paying in taxes.
Right.
Right.
But I want to add too that it's a little more complicated than that it's just frozen. If the state of Michigan doesn't approve your school taxes going away, you have to pay the school taxes on the growth. And that's like a 2-step process. It's first approved by the city commission to be an Oprah, and then it has to go on to the state. And I don't know exactly what criteria they use, but I don't want to imply that there's no taxes on the increase. There could be taxes on the increase for school only.
Good point.
Is there any downside to creating the entire central business district as an Oprah district? Because how would that impact potentially buildings that are, let's say a building's in great shape and there's no reason that it would be, anything done to it in the near future? Would that have any detrimental effect on its value?
It wouldn't affect their value at all. They just would not be eligible to apply for the abatement from you if they don't meet the contaminated, blighted, or functionally obsolete. So I think the only downside is you have more properties in the district than you probably need, but they still have to meet the same criteria in order to be considered.
Thank you, Nancy. Go ahead, Lori.
The abatements aren't a certain percentage. It can be set by the city commission. It's not just like 50% or 100%, right? You can set the abatement, or is it usually 100% abatement? Or it's 100% frozen, I should say.
Go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, this one doesn't really mess with the millage where you're paying half millage. It's a freezing and an adjustment of the taxable value. So it's not really an abatement, if you will.
Okay. And George, your property was a public space. I think it was the administration for so long, which would have been in the public school system. So it wasn't creating any taxes.
Right. And before that, it was a post office.
Right. Yeah. So when you bought it, in order to make your investment, they gave you a 6-year frozen equity or frozen value, taxable value that helped you.
Yeah, the taxable value, I think, was based on what I paid for it. Maybe I'm right. And Marianne probably knows more about that.
Long ago. Oh, I understand.
Yeah, it was sort of like what I paid for it, but then the $200,000 or $300,000 I put into the building wasn't taxed until that's what they gave me in abatement.
6 years later, right?
Yeah, it's a so that you'd have time to. That's how I remember it working. I don't.
Yeah, I didn't want to be.
I'm not a business person, actually, to be honest. So I apologize.
I was confused because I was thinking, how did that not have any taxes? What? It wasn't taxable, and then it was like, oh, it wasn't taxable because it was a public building. So,
private to private transfer, you would have the value that it was on the roll to start with. Then the improvements wouldn't be taxed, but because this wasn't what's tax exempt to start with, it was a difference.
And right now we already have a building downtown, the corner of University and Broadway, the old Isabella Bank and Trust building with the big slats all over the facade, the historical facade that's below it, which was a really unfortunate way to, design the outside of a building. But I know that has an Oprah, doesn't it?
It's in a district. So the first stage has been met, but they haven't filed an application yet to actually have an Oprah on it.
Right. I would assume there would be no reason to take that one building and make an Oprah district if in the future they weren't planning on asking for, a freezable tax value. I mean, why, right?
Well, it was put in, the district was created in 2014. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, 2014. And so that district has been in place for a long time, but still has not attracted someone who can make that project work yet. But that's one of our priority projects through the redevelopment ready communities. So hopefully there will be some traction on that in the near future.
Okay. And right now it's owned by Isabella Bank and Trust.
Correct.
And houses Jim McBride's MDC, or it's late.
Yeah, he's a tenant of that building.
Yeah, because it's like MEDC. No, that's Lansing, right? So, but I have concerns doing a blanket district over the downtown, and I'll tell you why. My experience is any developer that's going to be able to get a tax break, which this is, I mean, you're freezing the taxable value. So whatever they put in, they don't get taxed. And just to remind you, anybody that does improvements to the residential property, they don't have any access to this, even when they're bringing up the neighborhood, right? I would love to see if there was any kind of district that we could do on a residential area, such as the West Side. So when people might take advantage of the grants, because I was thinking earlier when we made those decisions about the grants that are going out, the 30,000 and the 60,000, when those people make those improvements, their taxes are going to go up. So we're already taking a home that may have difficulty making improvements, and then we're turning around probably the next year and taxing them for those improvements. I don't know if that's available, something at a residential level, or even for a certain specific area of our city, such as the west side, that might help out. But in my experience, if developers or investors can ask for lower taxes or get a tax break, they're going to ask for it. That would be common sense business practice, wouldn't it? If you can decrease the taxes you're paying, whatever application, whatever lawyer you have to buy to get that to happen, you're going to do that. Yeah, we may have some development taking place and some rehab. We could have had some of that with embracing the new industry that now, is coming forth and growing, building, people are getting applications in for growers and licenses. We could have opened that up to more places where these old buildings could be taken over by that industry. But I have a problem with doing a lot of tax freezes or tax abatements, and mostly because I think any businessman would be negligent if they didn't try to decrease their tax liability at all costs. And that cost actually comes back to us as taxpayers that fill that gap. So when you're doing a whole district, you're opening that up to how many residents or how many businesses, excuse me. So I'd be hesitant if I know that you can do it per building basis, like we already have with that building that's on the corner of University and Broadway. I think I'd be more comfortable doing that rather than encouraging everybody within that district to now have the opportunity to do some improvements and get a tax break. Now, I know that falls into criteria of blight and, obsolete. Those are very large descriptors that can be applied to anything.
Did we set the number of minutes someone can talk?
Oh, I'm sorry.
A timer or something?
I am so sorry, George.
Well, I mean, we need a timer. We need to say, well, people get 2 minutes or something, because this just goes on and on, to be honest.
I know, you're long-winded too, George.
I know, but I'm just, let's hear from some others.
Well,
right.
I've actually fought tax abatements and pilots, so I do have some experience in it. And I've actually gone to the ZBAs to try to fight it. So I'm trying to tell you that people will take advantage of this if we do a blanket area like this.
Yeah,
so
I think the area just says that they don't have to apply for the area.
I give my rest of my time to you. Go ahead.
I think the area just says that they don't have to apply specially. It doesn't mean their building is approved. Every project would come before the city commission. All you're saying is the historic district would be an area where they could petition for an OPRA. It doesn't mean they're approved for an OPRA. It just takes one of the roadblocks away. So the area doesn't, and the other thing is, what these people are doing is they're taking $100,000, putting it into something, and you're benefiting from it in the long term, just not in the short term. But I'm done.
And homeowners do that too, George. Homeowners try to do stuff to their properties, and they don't have any way to say, you're not going to charge me more. So you're benefiting one area of taxpayers.
Right.
Dick.
I appreciate the concerns that Commissioner Gillis has brought up, and I know it's near and dear to her heart about tax abatements, and that's something that's been very consistent. So I certainly take her comments and her views heavily when I weigh this decision to move forward with this.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Will.
No problem. I think that moving forward for the group, though, are there any concerns with the draft policy that's been drafted by Michelle? It seems pretty boilerplate to me, like pretty straightforward, I guess, is what I'm trying to say when I read through it. My only, I guess, concern was about the rescission at the end, and that's sort of, those are things that basically if someone doesn't follow through on their agreement, that we can basically end that abatement. Is that's what I was assuming when I read it, and it just, I don't know if it states it very clearly, but.
We would have to go through a process to rescind the abatement. The state law that's referenced in that A, there's a certain process we would have to follow for that, to have a public hearing, have an opportunity for input, and then eventually the State Tax Commission is the one who rescinds any certificate. So you would be making a recommendation to the State Tax Commission based on not following through on one of those items.
How was that monitored? Like one of them was like, you're not employing the number of people, I think, and things like that, where it's like, does that have to come through like a citizen complaint or says like, hey, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing?
The way we've proposed it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, is we would, if an OPRA is approved, we would recommend a contractual agreement for going forward. And one of those contractual requirements would be that they would have to report annually on those items that were considered when the abatement was given. So if the abatement is based on the number of jobs created, they would have to report to us annually on that. If it was based on the value they're going to put into it, they would report on that. So they would have to self-disclose that, so that if it didn't meet that criteria, then you could implement this potential rescission process.
That is correct.
Thank you, Nancy. Thanks, Michelle. Any other questions about the policy? Commissioner Elsager?
I don't have any questions, but just from hearing George's story and knowing that we do have some open buildings that maybe could use something like this, I think it would be a good idea to include them in a district so there is an incentive.
And I guess that kind of brings us, if there's no questions on the policy or general questions about how this works, is there support for creating this district? It sounds like there is some.
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of head nodding from George, Amy, Mary.
Yep.
Pete, you have any thoughts?
Tend to agree with George a little bit. There are a few buildings downtown that need to have something done. Isabella Bank, Lacrosse Building, there is a few down there. And then I think, just like George mentioned, as a business person, you're gonna look at a building, you're gonna look at a project and say it's gonna take X amount of dollars to sit there and put this on the market and make it marketable and use it. So you have to take into consideration what your taxes are going to be and what your return on investment is going to be that you're going to invest into this building. And I think that's why the Lacrosse building set for so long and Isabella Bank set for so long. They need a lot of work. Both of them do. Lacrosse building's terrible. When it went to the tax sale and the city wouldn't even buy it. It's right across the street from City Hall. And they could have bought it for like $30-some thousand. Now it's assessed at about, I think, last I heard it was about 170. Now, it's up for sale right now. They're trying to resell it, but who's going to pay that kind of money for that? It's a wreck. The building is a wreck. So I don't foresee anything being done with it. Maybe if there was an Oprah like this, maybe some can be done with that, and some can be done with that Isabella Bank building. But other than that, I don't see a business person coming in and saying, hey, I'm gonna have to come in and spend $200,000-300,000 here, and then my taxes are gonna go to X. What am I gonna wind up with a return? If I can't make the return, there's no use in making the investment. It doesn't make sense. Just like George said, if I couldn't get the abatement, I couldn't make it work. And that's what it boils down to. So I'm really on the fence for it. I think it can work for some of the projects that we have downtown here, and maybe some can get done with those buildings. Otherwise, I I don't foresee anything going to be done with them, actually.
Yeah, I think the nice part about this is that if we do approve the district, that there is some encouragement district-wide to say, hey, if you are halfway interested in doing something here, that there's, you know, a way that you might be able to get some tax relief. And then on our side as well, there's also individual projects sort of, you know, hey, you've got to meet these merits and you've got to, you know, prove basically to us to say, hey, this was warranted and we're willing to do that. I think that gives us some flexibility, and that's a nice part of this. So Nancy, did you need any further information from the commission, or does the commission need any further information from staff before we let go for the rest of the night?
I guess the only thing I'm unclear on, Mayor, is whether there seems to be enough interest to move forward with bringing the creation of the district forward. I wasn't sure where you ended up on that. Do you want us to bring that forward at the next meeting?
Yeah, I think we have, looks like we've got at least 4, maybe 5 people who are generally in agreement. And so
From a staff perspective, I think we are all set then, unless you have any further questions, Michelle.
commission have any more questions? Okay. Well, I would like to thank everybody. It's been a long night. We've had a few weeks since our last meeting, and this one was the usual 10 o'clock night. So overall, I think we've had a pretty good night, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks, if not sooner.
Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Heather. Whoops.